runs, walks, and hikes. There's always some fun adventure and a great sight, or just time to think on these occasions. But let me clarify. A long run to me is somewhere between 20 and 30 miles. Perhaps numbers under 20 could be considered long as well. I am obviously not one of the lost boys of Sudan. Boys that were forced to flee their home and walk, wait for it, over 1,000 miles. 3 zeros. Not just the mileage, but they had to walk across harsh, non-forgiving ground with bare feet and the threat of death from starvation, dehydration, lions, hyenas, snakes, and in reality also their fellow man. But before we get too far into this, let's hold up for a moment. Why were these children forced to leave their homes? Why didn't they just fly or drive? These questions are all answered in the book They Poured Fire on Us from the Sky, a story written by 3 men who were a part of the Lost Boys trekking out of Sudan. So what's so special about this book? Why did the boys trek out of Sudan? To understand this, let's talk more about the country itself. Sudan is located on the northeastern corner of Africa, bordering the Red Sea and most notably Egypt, Kenya, and Ethiopia. The country is split into 3 subsections: the north, the south, and the west, also known as Darfur. Looking closer at the south, we find oil. Sudan supplies oil to all of China and a few other states in Asia, and all of the oil comes from South Sudan. The mostly black Christians of the south send the oil to ports in the north to be sent out. And that started the conflict because the north does not pay the south for the oil, and this causes the consequential lack of infrastructure. When we look to the north, we find all the money, and lots of it. But further than money, the north also has support from China. The Chinese economy would halt without oil, and so when conflict arose in Sudan, China put a lot of resources towards keeping the oil supply steady. The Arabic Muslims of the north generally had a low opinion of the blacks, calling them abid, or slave, and did not provide enough money to the south in return for the oil taken. When the conflict broke out, the western region of Sudan, Darfur, also felt wronged by the northern government and joined the rebellion. Fueled by money, oil, religion, Muslims versus Christians, and ethnicity, Arab versus black, the north began to use violence to keep the southern Sudan in line. This did not work as expected. Enraged by the north, the Sudanese Liberation Army began to form and fight against the northern government. These rebels were hunted, and although their aim was to protect civilians, the northern's aggression to this army outweighed any and all protection this army offered. The north went fishing for rebels by draining the metaphorical sea to catch fish, the sea being the civilians and the fish being the rebels. Villages and towns were decimated, tens of thousands killed. The north had money and the backing of China, and so could afford airstrikes, landmines, and a large and equipped army. The north wiped out villages without leaving a trace. An airstrike would occur, followed by mounted soldiers killing all survivors, followed by the organized slaughter of all livestock, the burning of all the crops, houses, and corpses. The northern soldiers did not leave any town for displaced residents to return to. In a typical village, the women and girls spent their days in the house, cleaning and preparing food. The men would spend their time around the town, or around the house working on cattle or plants, and the boys would venture far out, leading herds of livestock like goats, sheep, and cattle. When villages were attacked, the girls would be burned alive in their homes. The fathers and younger men would either run to the houses to help protect their family, or greet the soldiers with spears, but either way would be slaughtered by the army. The boys were instructed to run and hide if they heard commotion from the village, and over 20,000 boys were driven from their homes and were guided south by soldiers and adults to refugee camps built mostly in Ethiopia. This conflict was violent. More than 2 million people died, more casualties than Angola, Bosnia, Chechnya, Kosovo, Liberia, the Persian Gulf, Sierra Leone, Somalia, and Rwanda combined. This is a lot of people. And it all comes down to the northern government trying to annihilate the rebels by clearing the entire population of the south. As Judy Bernstein says, 2 million dead, 5 million displaced and at risk. A Holocaust today. But now onto the book. They Poured Fire on Us from the Sky was published in 2005 and written starting from 2001 by 3 survivors of the Sudanese conflict: Benson, Alephoson, and Benjamin. Benson and Alepho are brothers, and Benjamin was their cousin. They grew up in an area known as Dinkaland, which is in the northern part of the southern Sudan. These kids grew up learning and participating as much as they could in their culture's traditions, like removing their bottom 6 teeth, circumcising the males but not the females, and polygamy. They didn't actively participate in polygamy because they were too young, but their parents did. In fact, the boys fled when they were 7 years old, and Benjamin fled when he was 5. The book tells their journeys from Dinkaland to America and provides details about the horrors that took place. Alepho and Benson, brothers, and Benjamin, their cousin, all experienced the same childhood, tending to livestock, learning culture, and playing with the clay mud cows that they created as a game. When conflict broke out, the boys were told by their mothers to run and hide if they heard gunshots from town or a commotion broke out. When this did occur, the boys each individually hid in bushes and tall crops and were eventually found and helped by other refugees trekking out of Sudan. The boys traveled through the Muro, Puberg Post, Pochela, and then Ethiopia, Panido, Tored, and Palateka. At each location, the boys were met with some kindness, but more disdain because they represented hardship, and were eventually driven out of each town by force. After spending some time in Ethiopia, the native Ethiopians' resources began to be depleted, and so they formed the Ethiopian People's Liberation Army and drove the Sudanese, protected by the Sudanese Liberation Army, out of Ethiopia. They were given a week to cross the border, which involved collecting all personal belongings and then walking to the border, which was marked by a river the size of the Nile. The book describes the scene as having boats ferry people across, but even with hundreds of crossings a day, it would have taken almost 3 days to get everyone to the other side. The boats cross as quickly as they can, but at some point the Ethiopian Liberation Army catches up and begins to open fire, killing 2,000 people in one horrible day. After many other refugee camps similar to this, the boys flee to one that tries to turn them into child soldiers for the Sudanese Liberation Army. They end up in Kenya, where they learn English. The story turns sweet when they become a part of a rehabilitation program that sends the 3 boys to America, where they settle in San Diego. Through the book, there were 2 main themes: how fragile life was, and how alone the refugees were. The SLA was able to protect themselves fairly well, but the authors shared that everyone knew that if an SLA man lost his gun, he lost his life. While trekking through Sudan, weary people would just drop dead. Fatigued individuals would stop and sit down in the shade of a tree and never get up. The scariest, though, is that if a healthy individual injured his or her feet, he or she would more often than not just die, because it was imperative to be able to run away from danger and keep moving towards water and safety. Alepho realized how fragile life is when he was roughhousing with his pet monkey. After a particularly rough shove, the monkey fell down and was dead. 2 million people died in this genocide. Out of the 20,000 lost boys, half died before even finding safety. Benson's mother told her kids that in ancient times the sun and the moon fought for the right to watch all that man did on earth. The sun won the fight and was set to shine light on all corners of the earth to watch human activity. But right now, the sun has seen too much evil and could not look anymore, leaving the earth dark with smoke. Benson said that man's too many evils have darkened the earth, and that there was no one to watch man's evil deeds now. Humanity was truly alone, with no help from the gods above. When the boys were scattered, they were on their own. Benjamin recounted villagers shouting at them to leave and get food from their own tribe. What little friendships could be made were, but soon enough the refugees would be thrown out of a village and the people scattered and mixed up. Benjamin, and Alepho lost each other for years at a time, and recounted meeting up with other family members, but then losing them, not knowing if they would ever see them again. These boys could only really worry about keeping themselves safe, and could not be responsible for their friends and family. The book described boys trying to work together to escape bad refugee camps and keep each other safe from evil people. but at times, splitting off from the group at crossroads was the only way for its survival. The book is one of the most authentic pieces of witness literature written, because the authors are from Sudan, and are telling about events that they witnessed and participated in. Secondly, because there are 3 authors, 3 stories, 3 different accounts of the same time period. The book is structured with parallel time, in that there are the equivalent of 3 experiences spliced up so each moment shows what is happening in 3 different areas of Sudan. This also upholds the veracity of this story by showing that these events befall all Sudanese children, whereas if there is only one author, it would be possible that that individual attracted conflict, and thus the story would not be an accurate story to depict. Judy Bernstein, the co-author of this book, became the mentor for these boys, who are by this time men, and quickly realized the horrors that they went through and the love that they have of writing. She helped the men compile their experiences and put their thoughts into a message to send out to the world. The book, Aleppo, describes a dream in which smiling skulls of some dead Sudanese refugees he saw on his trek to safety tell him that there's only one job now, and that is to start the process of finding peace in his heart. He is incredulous, and how can he do this? But the skulls affirm that this is a process he must discover for himself. Aleppo finds that he only feels revenge, but that he must let that go in order to find peace from within. The writing of these stories was Judy Bernstein's attempt to help these 3 survivors let go of the hatred they have experienced. The 3 survivors are now living in San Diego and regularly speak at conventions, sharing their experiences with others. Sudan, however, is struggling with conflict. A CNN broadcast, December 18, 2013, reported about 10 individuals arrested for the murder of over 500 civilians in Juba, the capital of southern Sudan. The UN is calling for a ceasefire and dialogue between opposing sides. At the time of this broadcast, around 10,000 civilians were camped outside of the city. It's tragic that after so many years, this war-torn country is still experiencing civil unrest. The stories from Benson, Aleppo, and Benjamin give us hope, though, that there will someday be the tranquility in Sudan that there should be. At the moment, all we can do is learn to find peace from within. Thank you.